Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the End User Computing Super Session. I'm Robert Baseman.
Hi, I'm Mike Coleman.
And we're going to be going through and really dovetailing into a lot of the things that Pat Gelsinger was talking about this morning at the general session for everyone that was there. What we're really talking about with this session today is titled Software-Defined Data Center Meets End User Computing. And really what that's all about is this theme that Pat was discussing overall, the mobile cloud era, and what that really means as it applies to all the things we're trying to accomplish within the end user computing space. This is where SDDC, hybrid cloud all come together with those larger trends that we're seeing with consumerization of IT and all the both opportunities and challenges that raises for our organization. We're really going to try to get down to a little bit of detail of how this all comes together. And we'll do it in a technical style, show some demos, show practically what are the things that SDDC and hybrid cloud are ultimately doing both today and in the future to make end user computing workloads a reality. So let's take a little bit of a step back in history as it applies to what's been going on within the broader VMware story and the transformation of IT. In general, we've been moving from this world for client-server workloads, where I knew specific servers, specific client machines, to this much more flexible universe of the mobile cloud era, exactly as was described this morning. And that's really about taking applications and data, bringing them up to the cloud, and then accessing them in a very flexible fashion from a vast array of devices in ways that really embrace how end users want to get their jobs done today. Now,
I was going to say that there's a real parallel there between sort of data center and EUC in that if you think about what a PC is, it's sort of this monolithic data center that sits on a desktop, right? Mm-hmm. It's a tied together operating system, it's tied together data, and it's tied together applications, and they all sort of sit there. And I think what we're talking about over the next hour is how you break that out and move it to the cloud and leverage all the goodness of our platform to make that happen.
Yeah, so really what that means is as we talk about the three pillars of VMware between redefining the data center with SDDC, changing the way we flexibly deploy and manage applications and infrastructure with hybrid cloud, and end user computing, what we're saying is end user computing does not exist on its own. It blends the other two together to really make all that stuff possible in a way that is highly manageable and highly cost effective. So let's talk about sort of that transformation from the end user perspective and how that then, we'll get to the infrastructure part in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like I was just talking about. If you go back, years ago in computing, and not even actually that far, it really was sort of everybody had the same computer on their desk. IT had a selection that you would go in and you would get a certain PC. There was a standard set of applications. You had a login to some sort of file server where you stored your data. Every 3 years, if you didn't break it, you got a new one, right? So it was all very sort of homogeneous, very controlled. There wasn't a lot of flexibility for the end user.
That was how you got the job done. That was the only way to do it practically with the technologies at hand. Right?
Absolutely.
Well, and where we're going today, of course, I think everyone in this room is probably a living example of this if you count how many devices are in your bag and on your person right now. It's pretty different.
Yeah, I mean, I use myself as an example. So I actually work for a group, I work under Rob's group, which is based in the Bay Area of California. I live about 1,000 kilometers to the north in Portland, Oregon. I actually carry 3 primary devices with me. I have a MacBook Air, I have an Android tablet, and I have an Android phone. All 3 of those devices are my own. I purchase them, and I do my corporate work on them. I actually tend to store some of my information that I'm not supposed to up on an unnamed cloud storage provider. Do you do that?
No, I've never.
Of course you don't.
Never did that.
So I mean, I have 3 different OSs I use in my bag, plus I connect to a remote desktop that runs Windows. So I have multiple operating systems, multiple devices. There's some data that resides inside the firewall. There's some data that resides outside the firewall. Some of it's controlled by IT, but a whole bunch of it's not.
Gotcha. So really, we're all living examples of what's going on within end-user computing today. And that really means that there's all these new both opportunities and challenges before us. That change is not stopping, and we're all sort of riding the tiger, so to speak, trying to make sense of it all and optimize it for both ourselves and our businesses so we can move forward. So that translates to devices, applications, and all those expectations that each and every one of us are carrying along there. Now, what that means at the end of the day, just as we're transforming data centers, we're also transforming the way we work, moving from a client-server-centric world with fixed devices, we all sat down and had our one little spot to get our job done, to all this flexibility between applications, device types, and work styles, moving between Portland, Oregon, and San Francisco on a regular basis.
Too regular if you ask my wife.
we can talk about that later. Yeah. But why do we translate this then to our technology is pretty simple yet profound. If we look at the Horizon Suite, which of course was alluded to this morning, and how we're also extending that and making a number of announcements over the course of today, really, it's a big day for us within VMware End User Computing. It's all about the set of technologies we're bringing together with the Horizon Suite. And what that's enabling is this journey, a journey from a world where it was all about PCs and physical to this world of what I call the virtual workspace, this new place to call home, even as I'm switching between all these different paradigms.
Yeah, I think the thing is that I'm fond of saying, and you may have heard me say it if you've heard me speak before, is that nobody ever woke up in the morning, went into the office to run Windows. That's not what you do. You fire up your computer, whatever it is, to access email or to write a PowerPoint presentation or to enter an order into some SaaS-based application. And you want to be able to find the data that you need and the applications you need the same way across any device that you carry. So I want a common way of getting information off of a tablet, off of a MacBook, off of a Windows, off of a virtual desktop, off of a physical desktop.
And if we look at the way we've done that so far, the earlier part of this year, we rolled out the Horizon Suite with various elements. And that virtual workspace really brings together those desktop workloads, various applications of all types, SaaS apps, Windows apps, now mobile applications with what's going on with Horizon Workspace and Android devices, an example, and marrying that also with data. So all three of these things, this triad of things that matter for me in end user computing, coming together, being accessible for end users in all locations where appropriate, but also for IT, doing some pretty important stuff there as well.
Right, I mean, there's this battle. We talked about, I spoke earlier about, it used to be a generic PC that you get refreshed every 3 years, and then it goes to this other side of the pendulum, which is I carry whatever device I want. So there's this intrinsic, the end user wants flexibility. They want to be able to use the devices they want, but as an IT organization, you've got to maintain control. There are legal and moral and fiscal responsibilities to ensure that your information is protected, right? So, if you've got to be able to control access, deploy the right applications, enforce those policies, monitor what's been going on in your environment, and make sure that everything is going according to your internal processes and procedures while still granting end users enough flexibility that they can be happy and productive.
Gotcha. And if, of course, we're talking about that virtual workspace where I can get at all my stuff, we fundamentally believe that that virtual workspace really does need to embrace all my stuff, right? So a great example of where, what that might mean in terms of all my stuff is an example of a set of technologies that are even from competitive organizations, right? You take XenApps, for instance. We know that the universe has a heck of a lot of XenApp out there, right? It's been around for 15 years plus, right? And so a lot of folks have that as part of what they would define as their virtual workspace. It's one workload of many. So an example of how we might take the virtual workspace going forward is, hey, what if we mixed in all application types, including stuff like XenApp, into it, right? I think we have an example of what this might look like over here, right? Let me go ahead. It's not graceful. The switcher is down below here.
We're going to see if this...
I get my exercise this morning this way. So walk us through, Mike, what we're showing here as a demonstration of where this technology might go.
Apparently we're not showing anything, Rob. I can see it fine.
Oh, there
it is.
There you go. Technical difficulties. There it is.
Oh, this is going to be... Okay, let's go back here. We're going to pause this. We're going to run
general
it back.
sessions, they have people to manage all this. We have to do it the old-fashioned way ourselves. You never put a bunch of product managers in charge of IT. You don't want that.
Yeah, so let's start over again. So what we're seeing here is actually the ability for an end user to go into their Horizon workspace and use single sign-on to get into a bunch of different applications. From an end user perspective, I don't care what the application is. It could be a SaaS-based application, it could be coming from ThinApp, or in this case, XenApp. We're going to click PowerPoint up here, and if you look at the bottom part of the screen, you'll see the Citrix receiver pop up. Like I said, from the end user perspective, we don't really care what that ends up being. We only care, or where it comes from, we only care that we can get the application we need. So, just make it work. And this is a great example of how if you build a platform like Workspace, we can enable other vendors and other technologies to be plugged into it quite easily.
So that's a great example of a vision. So this, of course, isn't something that we have available yet, but we're showing generally how a platform might work and where we're likely to go with these sorts of things, philosophically over time.
Absolutely.
So that's those pieces, and I got to switch back to the great switcher and everything. So far we've been talking about, oops, wrong thing here. Right button, hopefully I don't screw it all up. There we go. So that's all well and good. I think we have a good sense now of what a virtual workspace might be. What are we trying to accomplish at a high level with end user computing? But back to the SDDC, back to hybrid cloud, how does that matter, right? I think the key part is that all of these things have interesting bearing on the underlying demands of the infrastructure, and how we set up that infrastructure, how we deploy it, how we manage it, has profound implications on things like user experience. Just how good an experience do my end users get when utilizing a virtual workspace? How much does it cost? Right? There's real hardware behind all this. Real dollars in our organization get spent on deploying this stuff. So how can we optimize CapEx? Right? And furthermore, operationally, how do I make it easy? I want to drive down OpEx, but really unlock that business agility that's so big a part of what we're accomplishing with SDDC in general.
I mean, it sort of is the trifecta, the three, make it great for the user, make it easier for the admin, and make it easy on the organization by saving money.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And our hypothesis is that there's a few key areas that the SDDC is going to do for us here, particularly as we look at these Windows workloads that are our history, right? We still have a ton of Windows applications and desktop needs out there. So we're going to spend a bit of time focusing particularly on how SDDC and hybrid cloud computing are going to really change in some pretty profound ways how these three things get dealt with. So you talk about Windows workloads, that's a pretty wide expanse of use cases. It can encompass virtual desktops, it can encompass physical devices, and of course we have these two technologies, Horizon View and Horizon Mirage, that are ultimately responsible for helping deliver and manage these workloads in a set of important ways. And on the data center side, this maps pretty well to some of the challenges that we're seeing in terms of deployment and opportunities with SDDC.
Well, so when you think about end user computing in the data center, there's a lot of moving parts. There's storage, there's networking and security, there's compute. And what we can do is we can start taking those discrete components, we can abstract them into a virtual layer, we can group them together, and we can automate the provisioning, which means that we can start seeing the flexibility across the entire infrastructure that we've seen on sort of the compute and desktop side before. And so we can kind of look at these things as these different layers that we talked about. And what we're going to do over the next little bit is we're going to look at 4 key areas. We're going to take a look at how do we make it easier to manage and keep an eye on what's going on in your environment, how you can be proactive in supporting it with VCOps Review. We're going to look at how we're going to make it great for end users by enabling new use cases with 3D graphics. We'll also spend some time talking about some technology that's coming up both in the networking and security realm, as well as with our virtual storage area networking technology. Yeah.
And along the way, we'll touch on a few of the kind of announcements that just came out this morning, both on the stage, as well as some of the things, if you check out all the press releases that just hit all the airwaves about our upcoming releases. And there's a lot of new great stuff there. So we'll give a little taste here and there over the course of the session. So in the end of the day, we're looking at how all these workloads are being deployed. It's really about making that virtual workspace awesome, right? And so that comes to great user experience, it comes to reducing the CapEx spend, and it comes to enhancing management, giving great business agility. And we'll tackle these one by one and give these examples. So let's start with the user experience part. This is one that's near and dear to your heart, Mike.
Yeah, this is actually my day job at VMware, as I'm the product manager in charge of 3D graphics for end user computing. And we've got actually a sort of a three-tier approach to 3D graphics. We start on the far side there with the software-based 3D. This allows us to provide 3D processing without a physical GPU or graphics processing unit in the server. This is great for people who just want to run like the Aero Windows interface in Windows 7. We move from there into the shared graphics where we take that same sort of technology, but we back it up with GPUs in the server. So you put a few GPUs in the server, you share them across all the VMs, you get the benefits of high availability, DRS, vMotion, those type of things, but you get the increased computing power of actually having a GPU in the server. This is great for people who need to do work around reviewing and editing of 3D content, right? So you want to pull a model up, you want to look at it, maybe make an annotation, boom, you're done. The last one is what we're actually announcing at the show with the release of the next version of Vue, and it's direct, and it's the ability to take a GPU and map that into a specific virtual machine. And you can do a lot of impressive things. As a matter of fact, we have a video here that shows some of this stuff at action.
See if I can work the controls again here.
Yeah, this is going to be good every time, folks.
There we are. So this is actually the shared. So this isn't even the full dedicated.
Yeah,
right?
this is mostly shared in here. And this video comes from a college actually back there. So I'll explain a little bit about the technology behind it. What you can see on the screen, though, is the performance. So this is one of our customers, and we said, what are you using it for? They're a college that takes a bunch of different apps that they have to run in their labs for education, and they run it on a VMware Vue platform. And so here you can see AutoCAD running, pretty high resolution, very smoothly. As Rob mentioned, this is the shared graphics model. You can actually do this, well, maybe not so smoothly. There we go.
That was the Mac actually doing that.
That was the MacBook, I assure you. So with the direct model, you actually get higher performance than this. You get native support for NVIDIA drivers, CUDA calculations, OpenCL, all of that stuff. We actually have both these technologies running in the hands-on labs, which are over in Hall 7, so you could sit down and play with this. We also have it in our booth, and you can check it out in our booth as well as the NVIDIA booth.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So I guess that's really one great example, and because all that really just rides on the power of SDDC. What's going on in vSphere on the compute layer is what really makes these sorts of use cases possible.
Absolutely.
All right, let's shift back then as we go with the flow. I mean, work the buttons at the controls here.
We need a clapper.
That would be freaking awesome.
And then it would switch displays. I'm gonna work on patenting that.
That would be great. So we've covered end user computing on the user side here. One of the ways SDDC can make our virtual workspace better. Let's talk about CapEx next, because honestly, if there's any one thing that's held back VDI as being pervasive out there over the course of the last 5 years, I think it is CapEx, right? If I look at the cost of a VDI deployment net for deploying it, I mean, great value, and it's really, really powerful, but there's a lot of investment that goes into the infrastructure behind that. So how can we ultimately, as an industry, help accelerate those use cases to unlock some of the potential there? One part is, of course, just the ecosystem. We should talk a little bit about them, what's going on there first.
Yeah, I mean, storage has long been sort of an area in VDI deployments where you had to have a lot of different sort of considerations. Do I want flash? Do I want spindles? What about dedupe? What about all these things? And you've seen a tremendous amount of innovation in there.
Yeah, it's a very different space than it was just even a year ago.
Vendors doing all kinds of really great stuff, from the biggest players to the smallest players, and really working in that ecosystem.
I swear when you walk around the show floor at VMworld now, we should really just retitle the whole thing to the Innovative Storage Expo, is what it feels like when you walk around down there. But really, a lot of these workloads and the changing around them is very, very key to VDI. Because VDI workloads are a bit different than traditional data center workloads, especially when it comes to I/O, right? They tend to drive a lot more I/O, be a lot more bursty, and that has some unique properties that historically weren't best served in terms of the cost to performance ratios you got with your normal spinning disk. Some of the technologies we're seeing here between high I/O, all SSD arrays, acceleration in software and hardware layers really are changing that entire cost model to bring the net cost of VDI to be a lot more reasonable when I compare it to physical devices. Now, it doesn't stop with just us hoping, however, that the ecosystem is going to continue to innovate there. They are, but VMware, of course, is in the business of accelerating things, right? So that's a big motivation behind what's been going on with the virtual SAN technology, which was, of course, discussed at this morning's general session. And with the combination of vSphere 5.5 and its beta of vSAN and the upcoming release of Horizon View 5.3, you'll be able to try out that vSAN beta for yourself and start kicking the tires. Talk a little bit more about what vSAN actually does for us here.
Yeah, I actually like this technology because I'm not a storage guy. Right? I actually do have a background in IT. I was an IT admin for a long time. I was actually, this usually gets a chuckle, I was actually a certified Banyan engineer at one point. Anybody even know what Banyan is anymore? Yeah, one guy back, two guys.
Banyan.
Yeah, we're all former Banyan people. So I'm not a storage guy, but with vSAN, what I can be is become a fairly effective storage administrator because it builds some intelligence in there, right? It goes through and it looks at the configuration of the system I'm going to run on. And it goes, oh, you've got a certain combination of spindles and flash, and you want to do VDI workloads. I have a profile for that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take your data or your storage across multiple systems, your local storage. I'm going to amalgamate that into one virtual storage area network appliance, and then I'm going to apply this profile. You don't have to worry about what's the right mix of flash versus spindles, where do I put the cache, where do I do this. It's going to take care of that for you. As an admin, of course, you can make some tweaks if you'd like, but if you're more like me, you just click next, 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 boom, done, and your storage has been set up.
So it's really converting a set of server-based storage and turning that into, for as far as a virtual workload is concerned, a data store. So I take some hosts, cluster them together, bam, out comes a data store. And that's pretty ideal for a VDI workload. We're still, of course, in early testing of this, but we're already seeing performance that's on the order of just 10% less in terms of I/O throughput as an all SSD array. So pretty high performance technology. Applied to the right use cases, it'll really be able to help accelerate and optimize the TCO for a typical desktop runtime. Now, in terms of how this, though, gets applied in practice, not one of these technologies necessarily stands all on its own. There's a bigger design behind how all this stuff is going to work together. So when I look at technologies like Mirage, they come together very well with some of these underlying developments with the SDDC in terms of how I end-to-end manage and deploy my VDI workload. So when you get into this, what we really mean is with this underlying storage, I can now do things that may make some traditional methods of doing all stateless-based desktops not necessary. That was always a challenge. Before, VDI was a great alignment in terms of cost and performance for a task worker, but knowledge workers were oftentimes caught in the middle. I had to spend a lot more on them in order to get the performance and behaviors and sort of customization that a knowledge worker expected. With the Mirage technology, we can take the new definitions of storage, use those to get my CapEx cost down on storage, and then manage those things on an OpEx side in a way that's very friendly for a knowledge worker. It makes a lot more sense to sort of demonstrate this than necessarily to keep rabbiting on about it. So let's go ahead and switch to a little day in the life of walkthrough over here.
Yeah, so just to set this up, as Rob talked about, there was this sort of tension between, how do I save the most money? How do I deploy the system in the most economically feasible way? And how do I provide the flexibility? And so traditionally, you sort of had this idea that if I wanted to be ultimately flexible in VDI, I had to deploy a full clone desktop. Mm-hmm. And I had to use a lot of storage to do that, because that was the only way to be able to go in and insert, allow the user to insert applications. Because your alternative was to use something like link clones, which were great because they let you leverage a master golden image across multiple people and save a lot of money, but they didn't allow for the flexibility. So there really wasn't a way to sort of marry those two worlds until we came to the Mirage technology. With that, you can define an application layer, a common golden image, marry those two things together, and still allow end users the flexibility.
Let's see how that works in reality. So what's the story here we're going to tell?
So Jonathan is the IT wizard, and he's going to basically set up some applications for us. So he's building a base image that has a handful of applications. And then he's going to go in and build an image in Mirage as well and add about 9 more applications. So he's got the base image and the Mirage applications. He's going to marry those two things together by selecting that base image he created in Mirage. That gets pushed out to his full clones. And there you can see, there's his, applications. Some of them are part of the base image, some of them are not. Then I come along, and I'm a power user, and I want to be able to do the things I want to do. So I go in, I'm not a vSphere admin, delete. IE, every day, all day, no Google Chrome for this guy. Toolbars full of spyware, we're going to get rid of that too. And then finally, I won't be held down by the man. I will use the PDF reader of my choice. And we're going to take Adobe off, and I'm going to install Foxit PDF reader. It's free. It's pretty good. We're going to make that the default reader. And you can see now there's an association there. So as an end user, I've gone in and customized my desktop. I've added some applications. I've taken some out. I've set it up just the way I like it. I'm pretty happy until reality sets in. And then I realized that IE is not quite all I thought it was. It's a little different from IE4. Adobe Reader actually is pretty good. So I call Jonathan. He's happy to hear from me. I have him on speed dial. He goes in and he says, well, while we're at it, we're going to add some more applications. So he adds 3 new applications into that base layer that he had created initially. 7-zip, Java, Notepad++, every coder's notepad of choice. And he's going to push all those changes back out to the users. So users are going to get the applications restored, but he's also going to let me keep the applications that I've installed. He could remove them if he wanted to, but he's going to let me keep them. We restart the system, and boom, there it is. There's the changes that I had taken away. They're all back. If you look, there's the applications he added to the new base layer, Java, 7-zip, and Notepad++. And then finally, the applications that I had put in there, there's Foxit Reader. But because he enforced the base layer, now Adobe is the reader of choice again. This is an example of how an IT admin can define a standard environment, but I, as an IT end user, can still remain somewhat flexible.
That really is taking advantage of what's going on in SDDC. It wouldn't make sense to adopt this model if we didn't have changes in the underlying storage ecosystem and other technologies that will make all of this deployable in a reasonable TCO. It wouldn't be practical otherwise. So this is really how we're all coming together, and I'm going to jump back down here and switch back to the workflow. And that's a great segue to how management itself is changing. Talking about reducing CapEx, and Mirage is able to take advantage of that. We're going ahead, and with the upcoming release of Mirage 4.3 later this quarter, we're announcing that in a marketing launch today. It will start to have compatibility with managing Horizon View-based workloads. So all of this is coming together to really change the way we're able to both deploy in the hardware and the storage and manage on top. So on the management theme, let's talk about one other core part of the software-defined data center. That's networking.
Yeah, if you think about a View infrastructure today, a Horizon View infrastructure, there's a lot of networking components that come in, most times from third party, most times in hardware. We need load balancers, both locally and globally. We need firewalls. All of this sits on top in addition to the security server that ships as part of View. Getting that stuff, and especially in the case of the physical hardware, can take quite a while. You've got to order it from your vendor. You've got to get it racked. You've got to get it configured. It's physical, so you've got to go in and plug all the cables and do all the config on it. If you take that and you were to virtualize it and put it into one appliance, you could start affecting not only the economy of the cost, but also the time it takes to deploy.
That makes sense. So all those same things that apply to software-defined networking for data center workloads, it all comes together in terms of the business agility I want for various elements of my end-user computing workloads as well. So as we look ahead and as NSX evolves, it will quite likely become an important substrate of what we're trying to do within end-user computing in general. Now, a great way that plays out, if we just look at it in practice, obviously, software-defined networking really shows its own when there's change in the system. I can rack up everything and set all my firewalls one way at one point, and that's a one-time cost. But the problem is the workloads I'm dealing with today are dynamic. There's a lot of change that can happen, and I want my system to be self-aware and adapt. That's the real benefit overall, and applies equally to end-user computing as it does in the data center. So here's one example in terms of firewall. You want to walk us through this one?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what could happen, a user's going to log in, and they're going to come in. We've taken and we've put our load balancers and our everything into a virtual appliance, as that user logs in, everything is fine as long as the network stays the way it's supposed to. Traffic gets routed correctly. But what happens if that connection server goes down? Well, what you want is you want that infrastructure to self-adapt. Seeing the connection server is down, hits the appliance, and it gets routed over to the appropriate backup connection server. Or if it's overloaded, or whatever the condition may be, it's smart enough to know what to do next in a logical fashion.
So there's a lot of value that's ultimately going to bring for that business agility and flexibility of my system. One piece in which we're simplifying how management will work, and that's a great direction for our solutions going forward. It's not just about compute, it's not just about storage. Networking is going to be an important area for the future as we look at how we deploy end-user computing workloads, and NSX should be a great platform for that going forward. Now, another key area that it's in the here and now today is what's going on with management of the system in general. A lot of people already know that vCenter Operations for View is a plugin we created about a year and a half or so ago that basically teaches vCenter Operations about what a VDI workload actually looks like, makes it understand things about PC over IP, etc. And we're going to walk through a little demonstration, just a quick mini tour of that to give a feel for what's already available today, and we'll talk a bit about some of the latest announcements there too. Getting my exercise. All right. So what do we have going on here, Mike?
So really, I'm just going to let this play and talk a little bit about what VCOps for View does and how it does it. It's really a component that goes in and it looks at all of your infrastructure. And it looks at it in ways, as Rob said, that makes sense to a VDI deployment, a View deployment. So it can look at users, or it can look at sessions, or it can look at components in the infrastructure.
Pools of desktops. It maps those things together.
It looks at all of them, and then it does a couple of really nice things. It gives you sort of this heat map view where you go, wow, there's a problem. So let me drill into that. And so you can go from very, very high level to very, very low level in about 3 or 4 mouse clicks. You can look at your screen and say everything's good, or it's not. The other thing it does that's really powerful is it starts to collect that data, and it stores it in the database. And all of a sudden then, you have this historical perspective of what's been going on in your infrastructure. One of the most frustrating questions for an end user and an IT admin is, my system is slow, why is that happening? There's a number of different ways that problem can be attacked. But once you start gathering data and you have some sort of analysis in the background, you can look for anomalies and you can start being proactive rather than reactive. You can see things are going off the rails. Storage is overloaded. The CPU is overloaded. Whatever it is. You can see in this graph clearly something is wrong. But with the power and the ability to drill from very high level to very specific, you can start troubleshooting that almost immediately in a context-sensitive way that makes sense for a virtual desktop environment.
Gotcha. And I think the other key thing about this is how it ultimately gets consumed. Up until this point, of course, we've made this available as a separate SKU, right? Something you could purchase as an add-on to enhance your View deployment. Effective today, we just announced our intention to start bundling vCenter Operations as a part of the overall Horizon suite. So it will no longer have to be purchased separately, right? If you're investing in the overall story behind the Horizon suite, we believe that this is a key component to effectively managing that end-to-end. So you can still purchase it separately in conjunction with the more a la carte View model. That will still be fine. But if you're going for the full deal and you see that, hey, this is the direction I want to strategically invest, we fundamentally believe that this is the right way to manage your infrastructure. And it's 100% aligned to what we're doing with SDDC for server workloads as well. So really important part of the overall management approach to end-user computing workloads now and for many years to come. So that brings us to another kind of key point, which is about how things are changing, not just regarding SDDC and how I manage that, but the notion of public clouds, hybrid clouds. Of course, we talked a bit about that at the very beginning of the general session this morning, so we're all pretty excited about the announcements there. But to put a little context around it, all the things we've talked about with how SDDC enhances end-user computing workloads with user experience, changing the way I spend my money and enhancing and simplifying my management. A lot of these things can be said about, in fact, all of them in one way or another can apply to taking workloads that have traditionally only deployed in my private cloud and choosing in the right use cases to deploy those to public cloud. Right? So what we're going to talk about next is a little bit of the motivation. Right? There's a lot of reasons why I might want to do that and utilize public cloud as part of my strategy for end user computing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of big ones. The first might be size of your organization, right? You might not want to justify an IT staff to manage this, or you may not need a full-blown Vue deployment in a branch office. The other is on-demand services. If you work for an organization that has seasonal workloads, so at the holiday season, you're taking a lot of extra orders, or in the US, you have tax preparation and you want to be able to ramp up for that in the first part of the year. There's a lot of reasons, along that. Also, disaster recovery, not wanting to maintain a separate physical data center, but still wanting to have some level of redundancy in the case of pandemic or some other disruption of service.
So a lot of great examples and use cases of where leveraging the public cloud can make a lot of sense. Right? And we've seen this build up over the course of the last couple years with a lot of great partnerships we've already been investing in. Now, of course, we already let the cat out of the bag this morning as far as VMware's acquisition of our previously partners, now a part of VMware, Destone. That partnership over the course of the last year, year and a half, 2 years really, has enabled a lot of great solutions with service providers to bring this technology, this use of the public cloud for getting at desktop as a service, a reality today. So I'd actually like at this point in time to welcome Danny Allen, who is the CTO for Destone, one of the founders. He is going to come up and talk a bit more about who Destone was, I suppose. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you very much.
Has he been through the has he been through the official VMware initiation?
Oh, wait, no, come in. No, you don't
Okay,
have to.
well, I'll be back.
Okay.
That doesn't sound good.
All right, so Danny, tell us a little bit about kind of the history and how we got to the point we're at today.
Sure. So Destone has been around for about 5 or 6 years independently, and obviously now part of VMware. But we started out believing that it is true that some people will want on-premise VDI and virtual desktops, and I've been using a virtual desktop myself for 3 years, but there was a use case because of the things that you highlighted, students, for example, or because you had remote users, that some people would want to go to the cloud. And so what we did was we built a platform for service providers that would be simple, that would be secure, that would be very scalable so that they could offer DaaS. And in doing that, we had to solve some really hard problems, things like multi-tenancy. It's easy to say you're multi-tenant, but if you have a common infrastructure, how do you make sure that you isolate the storage? Every tenant has their own vFiler, and at the networking level, every tenant is segmented onto their own network. Or at the management level, how do you make sure that they're all coming in through a broker? You don't have a common database that everyone's data is all shared in there. Or probably most importantly, they're all using directory services. How do you enable them to use their own directory services and not need to federate or extend a trust to a service provider? And so we built this platform to do exactly that, and we have some great partners offering this today, and I'd like to introduce one of them, which is Dell. This is Terry Vaughn, who is the Director of EUC Services at Dell. Terry. And they have been offering cloud-hosted virtual desktops using our platform now, and has many very successful customers that have bursted or gone to the cloud for these desktops as a service.
So Terry, tell us a bit about what Dell is doing today in this space and how that could ultimately be applicable for probably a lot of folks in the room. What is it that I can do right now to leverage desktop as a service?
Well, that's an important part. It's what's right now. A lot of stuff that Robert and Mike were talking about are futures. What we want to talk about is what's available today. We have 2,500 seats of capacity in the UK ready to run right now. We can get you up and running in as little as 5 or 6, 7 days at the most. That's complete integration with your Active Directory, up and running with your network, extended to your data centers, and get your users up and running. I literally called yesterday and said, hey, I want a virtual desktop to run from this tablet out of the UK, and 3 minutes later I had a desktop sent to me from a virtual desktop perspective. So what we're going to show here is a little demo of how easy it is for you to be able to get access to the virtual desktop environment. What you're seeing here is the Enterprise Center, and from the Enterprise Center, it'll run automatically, it's timed. You can see users, you can see desktops, you can see pools, and you can see data centers. So we get to select a pool for a particular user. What we'll do is we're going to go in here and we'll say which data center do we want that from, which users do we want to apply that to. Here, in this case, we're going to go into the pools. We're going to add 5 additional desktops. It's running right here. It's going to create 5 new desktops. In there, you'll obviously have a gold image already created. That gold image is from the Desktop Management Organization. That image will have a certain set of apps associated with it. So this pool is getting created. We'll go back after we save. You'll go back to the Enterprise Console. And then we'll go into the next step, which is actually, hey, which users, which Active Directory OU groups have access to that pool of desktops?
Now, Terry, do I know what kind of infrastructure is running behind this, or do I need to know what kind of infrastructure is running behind this?
That's the good thing. All that complicated stuff those guys just talked about, servers and storage and network, zero. You don't have to know that. Our offering has 3 different desktops, 3 different sizes of desktops. You can buy MPLS networking. You can buy different sizes of desktops. You can switch them in a couple of minutes. If you say, hey, I want a 4 CPU, you can get a 4 CPU versus a 2 CPU.
So what we just saw there, obviously, was an administrator going into Dell's cloud and saying, hey, I want 5 desktops, and clicking a button, and it provisions them. And so one of the use cases that Robert had was for students. And so one of the things that we know is that students are using these Chromebooks now that are really simple, web-based. There's no receiver, nothing on these other than a browser. And so what you have on the screen here is Robert's Chromebook with One Direction as his background, because he's a big One Direction fan. Are you going to sing for us?
So you'll have to like rip the chords out, then I'll follow the changes. I'll try to keep up.
Okay. So this is a Chromebook, and leveraging no more than a browser, if you click on
there now. Yeah.
Here, what it will do is it will go out to that cloud that we just saw, to that DAS service. You saw him provision 5 desktops as part of the ART pool. He goes to the student portal, and now he simply puts in his credentials, and he can access that cloud-hosted virtual desktop. So very, very simple, and this is leveraging one of the, we've been partnered now with VMware, we're part of VMware, I should say. We have been leveraging their PCOIP protocol for that premium user experience. And so no change for the users. They can continue to use the View client as the endpoint. But we also now support the BLAST protocol. And so with nothing more than a browser, Roberta can go out and connect to Horizon Academy.
Right? So really what this is doing is bringing together that end user experience doesn't change. Whether I'm doing private cloud or public cloud, from an end user perspective, it's seamless. What we've done now is really change, however, the model of how I can get onto that, get started with it, and partners like, well, previously Desto, now a part of, we have to get used to that, right?
Yes.
And partners like Dell will continue to drive this forward in exciting ways, but it's here today. As Terry said, we can do it right now.
And you can go down to the Dell booth and you can see, running out of Slough in the UK, which is outside of London, an actual demonstration real live. The PowerPoint that's running on the screen down there is running out of Slough. And you can see the video running, PC over IP, and it's very impressive. So go down and put your hands on the keyboard, and you never know, somebody might give you a tablet down there.
There probably won't be a Chromebook in that booth, admittedly. But, so where is this going, of course, is the last question. We always like to talk about where it's going. For that matter, well, if this is working so well, why the heck did VMware spend all the money to just buy Desto, and why couldn't we just continue the partnership as it went? The real motivation is to then accelerate sort of that next step. What we've done now is bring our depth of experience for years in private cloud. We're now here and now with enabling great solutions on the public cloud, and we want to accelerate those to get to a world where that can be truly hybrid. The sort of Shangri-La for all of us is for IT administrators to be able to seamlessly move my workloads between private cloud deployments on-prem, public cloud deployments with service providers, and what do we call that? We call that hybrid cloud. That's the whole point. So what you'll see is us investing, moving it forward to ultimately accelerate to that day where we can have that clean, single pane of glass management. We won't have that out of the gate, but that's the long-term direction and why it was important for us to bring this all together to really advance that story and accelerate the world to being truly hybrid. And really what that gets us to at the end of the day, back to the themes of the morning, is when I talk about the mobile cloud era, as was described by Pat and many others, that mobile cloud era really is powered by VMware SDDC and hybrid cloud to make it all possible. So I'm going to pause now, thank everyone for coming this morning, and we have about, 15 minutes or so. We can take a few questions, and please, we have folks with microphones, I believe, if the technical people are out there. If possible, raise your hand if you have a question so we can get a mic to you. If you don't want to wait, I can try to repeat your question so that everyone can hear it as best we can.
She's there we go. She's hustling.
There we go. We got the hustle there.
Sound support.
Sound support. The question was sound support. In particular, I'm assuming the HTML access is the question.
Oh, let me talk about that.
Yes. Perfect segue.
My other day job is I'm the product manager for Blast and HTML Access. So we're releasing with Feature Pack 1 for Vue, the release that's coming out coincidental with Vue 5.3, an update to HTML Access. We put this out a little less than a year ago, and we thought this is just going to be about people needing to pop onto a device really fast, access a desktop, and get away from it, right? I want to use my brother's PC or something. What we found was people have fallen in love with this feature. And so we did a bunch of work on it. We improved the performance by a scale of anywhere from 2 to 10 times. So it's going to do less CPU, it's going to perform better than it had previously. We added support for audio out, as you were asking. We've also added support for copy and paste, which we didn't have before. So now we have a client that can do audio, copy, and paste. We also have added support for high definition displays, so MacBook Air or Chromebook Pixel like we have up there, so that you can do that, as well as native full screen. So the client now becomes a real full-featured client for devices where you don't have the permission to install a client, someone else's PC for instance, or on devices such as the Chromebook, where we don't have a native example. So what you saw up here with the demo for the students is really the scenario we're trying to enable, especially in education where Chromebooks are becoming so prevalent. We believe that with audio and copy and paste that we've done a great leap forward, performance enhancements and all of that. We're very, very excited about that release.
So thank you for the question. We'll pay you the money outside the door for that excellent question. Other questions out there? Try to stump us.
Oh, right, don't do that.
One right there.
I'm easy to stump.
Hi guys, great presentation. Security is obviously a big thing as part of this. So desktops in the cloud, can you allay any concerns around regulatory controls you may need to apply for SOX users, let's say?
Gotcha. You want to start with that because you guys are living it right now, right?
So there are two things when we go through our pre-sales process. There are two questions we get asked the most. It's network connectivity and it's security. So we've built a security white paper, obviously working with our Destone team. We have a dedicated security expert on there, and I will tell you, it's a question that we've literally been able to put answers in FAQs, and probably 7 out of 10 times that answers the question between the security white paper and the FAQs information. So those 3 or 4 other times out of 10, we get our security expert on the phone. This guy's Brandon Swain from the States, part of SecureWorks organization inside of Dell, and he gets down to the next level of questions, whether it's HIPAA, whether it's PCI, whether it's, hey, I'm a highly regulated industry in the finance industry, and we get to that next level. But we've done a good job of educating the sales team. We're going to be educating the VMware field about those same questions and being able to answer that. But it's not been as difficult as I thought it would be.
And I think one of the key things at a high level there philosophically is that, when you ultimately, we work with service providers, and ultimately the service providers can build up a really deep level of expertise for particular areas. And so ultimately, these are organizations that will have had that same question asked a lot of times. So in some respects, it's almost an advantage rather than trying to, in some cases, do it yourself, because all those questions have been asked before. Right, so you're able to build on the experience and both successes and potentially mistakes that others have made previously. So that can, in some ways, be an advantage.
And Mr. Danny here is a chief security officer formerly, so.
Yeah, what do you want to add there?
I spent a decade in the security space and actually came to this because of security. And so one of the things that Robert highlights, to take it up a level, that I am passionate about is that the part of this is not about the cloud, is not just compute pooling, it's knowledge pooling and shared knowledge between organizations. And so what you get when you go to a Dell service, for example, is security is many different layers, right? There's the actual physical security, guns, guards, gates of the data centers. There's the infrastructure, software management security. There's the end user security. There's desktop security. And so what you get by going to that is a very educated service provider who can help you say, okay, we have a certification for the physical premises, but here's how you should address it in these tiers. Here's how we address it here. And you're faster to deploy and to solve some of those security challenges.
So another good question. Yeah, one more back there.
I noticed the protocol, when we use the BLAST protocol, it defaulted to port 8503. Is it possible to change that to 443?
What's that? I'm sorry, I couldn't. Defaults to?
I noticed when you were using your browser, it redirected on port 8503. Is it possible to change that so that it just sticks on 443?
Yeah, what you were seeing was a view of a gateway that we randomize ports in a customer specified range. If you want to go over 443, you can certainly do that. One of the things that I said that we had to engineer for service providers was the ability to do things even more than kind of traditional models. So there's a randomized port generator every time you connect that it will go over a different port in a range specified by IT. If you want to go over the same port every time, you can certainly do that.
And that's the Desktone implementation. In the standard implementation, we just connect through security server.
Yes.
Right, so however you set up your security server, because you can configure the port in there, that's the port we'll use. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if you were talking about the desktop as a service or the more internal implementation.
It was when you were demonstrating the BLAST.
Oh yeah,
yes,
okay.
it was.
Yeah.
It was.
Which was running with the Desktone stuff. That wasn't smoke and
yeah.
mirrors. That was the real deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We had another one down here.
Yeah, I was wondering the NSX. It was one slide, and you went fairly quickly past it. I know it said future, but could you maybe elaborate a bit, and also maybe how distant the future we are looking into?
Sure. And of course, in general, when we're talking about futures, if we're not talking under NDA, we have fairly strict financial guidelines about what we can or cannot say. So the most I can say is that we see that as an important direction. Right now, of course, with NSX, there's a lot of work going on to ramp it up fully to meet its needs for the data center workloads that were highlighted in the session today. So I won't give specific timelines as far as where we're going at. I can't. We certainly know some stuff, so if you happen to have an NDA with us and you want to have a conversation with one of our product managers, we can have those conversations offline. But in general, it's a technology we're excited about. And I'll highlight also, frankly, there's even tactical reasons why it matters for us when we look at end user computing. Right now, we've got these three products, View, Mirage, Workspace. Right now we're quickly on a course to have, 3 different little gateway things you drop in your DMZ. We'd really like to not have to have 3 gateways for one overall suite. We know that's dumb, right? So ultimately, we're highly motivated to bring all that stuff together to simplify, but the timelines remain TBD.
We got one back here in the back right corner.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Still in good shape.
Yeah, good.
Is it in the future possible to use the DirectDD or OpenGL applications?
So it's possible today, actually. So with VDGA, the direct pass-through model, we use the native NVIDIA driver, so whatever they support. So when the next version of OpenGL comes out, because of their position in the industry, they'll have day 0 support on that. So if you need the highest level of compatibility and the highest level of performance, then Direct Graphics is there today. The follow-on to that is, well, what if I want to use shared graphics? So today with shared graphics, we are limited to DirectX 9 and OpenGL 2.1. We understand that. We have a pathway moving forward on that, but again, some of the same things that Rob was talking about. There's certain things we can say in an open forum and certain things require an NDA. If you have a VMware account rep, get with them and they can get me on the phone and we can talk about those specific patterns. But I will tell you, yes, we have a path forward on the shared graphics. We'll be working on bringing those rev levels up so that you can get the same sort of compatibility in that shared layer that you have in the direct. But if you need that today, direct is your answer.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you get something out of that as well. By going with the shared model, it's not only just a cost thing. All those management pieces, because of the way we've uniquely architected it, you get to use vSphere as vSphere was intended. You know, I said earlier, vMotions work when you have a physical GPU in shared mode. You can even vMotion between machines that don't, one that has a GPU and one that doesn't. Right? So it gives you very flexible power there. You know, the trade-off for that is you're using the VMware drivers because we're abstracting away the hardware at a certain level, but you still get really darn good performance in many use cases like what that video was showing. The other thing you get, which is worth mentioning because this just recently was announced with vSphere 5.5, is you do get some level of vendor choice. What works with both VDGA and VSGA, particularly VSGA, is dictated by ESX's HCL. Right? So any GPU vendor that gets a GPU on the HCL will then immediately work. So when vSphere 5.5 came out, incidentally, a number of the ATI, AMD GPUs also got added to that HCL, so those then just work. Like all things, we have our competition, GPU vendors have theirs. Competition is good in the market. It makes keeps us all honest as far as our prices and moving us forward. So we view that level of abstraction as a healthy thing to enable and giving better choice across your different technology partners.
I'm going to just personal plug because I got to stick around until Thursday. I have a session Thursday morning, 9 to 10. You'll all be up that early, I'm sure. And I'll do an hour on graphics. If you don't want to stay up and listen to me, and sitting through this, I wouldn't blame you. You could go to today, 5 to 6, in D4. Will Wade from NVIDIA will be doing a session on graphics as well. Mm-hmm. So if you have interest in 3D, those are a couple sessions you should attend.
A lot of great opportunities. Other questions before we wrap it up and they give us the hook? All right, we'll hang around outside for a little bit.